He found a wounded bear in the woods. What happened next changed his life, forever striding through the dense, whispering pines of Yellowstone National Park. At dawn, Nathan had no idea his life was about to change forever. A simple weekend camping trip, just him, his camera, and the promise of sunrise views became something far greater when he stumbled upon a chilling sight, a wounded bear lying on the forest floor. Nathan's heart thumped as he knelt in the damp leaves, drawn by compassion despite his racing fears. At that moment, he knew he had a choice: walk away or stay and help. Little did he realize that this chance encounter would spark an unbreakable bond and transform his entire existence. Nathan Bennett had always loved the outdoors. Born and raised in a small town in Montana, he'd grown up amidst postcard-worthy mountain vistas, clear streams, and wide open skies. By the time he was 10, he could identify animal tracks on the trail near his family's home, pick out constellations in the unpolluted night sky, and start a campfire with just 2 stones and a bit of determination. Yet, as life moved on: college, a move to the city, a demanding job, he found himself drifting from the natural world that had shaped him. So, when work pressures and a nagging sense of emptiness weighed him down, he decided to take a weekend off. Destination: Yellowstone National Park. He yearned for the reverberating hush of pine forests, the sparkle of the rivers, and the restorative energy of towering peaks. He arrived at a remote campsite on a crisp Friday night in mid-September. The day had been long, but the drive was invigorating. Bright autumn colors wove across the mountainsides, and the sweeping roads cut through landscapes that reminded him of simpler times. Unrolling his sleeping bag, he inhaled the wood smoke-scented air and felt a gentle excitement flutter in his chest. He promised himself not to check his phone too often, just enough to assure his parents he was safe. This weekend was about him reconnecting with nature and, hopefully, recalibrating his spirit. Early the next morning, the sky began to morph from black to deep indigo. Nathan, already wide awake, sipped hot coffee under the dreamy glow of first light. He set out, camera in hand, seeking a vantage point to watch the sunrise. The trail, still cool with dew, led him deeper into the thicket of fir and spruce. The hush was profound, the only sounds coming from a faint breeze and the occasional rustle of small creatures stirring among fallen leaves. He trudged for nearly an hour, the gradual climb offering glimpses of distant peaks. As he crested a gentle slope, he noticed a disquieting sight: dark spatter on the foliage. At first, he thought it might be old berry stains, no cause for alarm. But then he spotted a trembling shape deeper in the shadows, partially concealed by a ring of ferns. His heart instantly hammered in his chest. Was that a bear? Nathan had always been taught caution around bears, especially in the wild. He knew not to approach them, never to feed them, and to remain vigilant. Yet something was different about this moment. The bear, most likely a black bear from its build, lay motionless except for labored breathing. Its fur was matted with drying blood that glistened sinisterly in the morning light. It looked smaller than a fully grown adult, perhaps an adolescent, but it was still a formidable creature. Fear clashed with empathy in Nathan's mind. "Easy," he whispered, instinctively raising both hands as he inched forward. In the hush of the forest, he was acutely aware of the risk. A cornered or injured bear could be extremely dangerous. He thought about retreating, searching for a ranger. But there was no immediate help around, and even if he found a park ranger station, it would take time to bring someone back. The bear let out a soft, pained groan. That single sound tugged at the deepest parts of Nathan's heart. He slowly backed up, scanning the ground for any sign of predators or, worse, a protective mother. No sign. So he carefully moved closer. He crouched, observing the injuries. One of the bear's hind legs looked badly wounded, possibly from a fight or maybe a fall onto a sharp rock. A bullet wound was also a possibility. He'd heard rumors of illegal poaching in certain pockets of wilderness, though it was strictly prohibited. The bear's fur around the wound was slick with blood. Nathan smelled the metallic tang of fresh blood in the air. He glanced around, searching for something to help with. He knew from childhood first aid training that controlling bleeding was a priority. Finding a sturdy branch, he snapped off smaller twigs until it was a clean piece of wood. Then he pulled off the bandana from around his neck, that old red bandana he'd had since he was a teenager. With trembling hands, he knotted the bandana around the bear's leg, trying to staunch the bleeding. The bear flinched, loosing a chuffing noise that made Nathan's stomach somersault. But it did not attack or try to escape. For what felt like forever, Nathan stayed there, speaking soothing nonsense under his breath. "It's okay, buddy. I'm just trying to help." Adrenaline surged through him, but so did a fierce tenderness. He remembered reading about wildlife rehab centers that could save orphaned or injured animals if they were found in time. Yet the question remained, could he move the bear or find help fast enough? He decided to do the unthinkable, try to contact a ranger from his cell phone. The area was remote, but maybe there was a faint signal. With fumbling fingers, he managed to pull out his phone. The screen flashed, no service. He groaned, scanning for a higher spot. About 100 yards uphill, where the trees thinned, was a rocky outcrop. That might work, but how could he leave the bear alone? He hovered, torn between his desire to help and fear that the bear might die if left untreated. After another minute of indecision, he resolved to try. Carefully, he stood. The bear stirred slightly, eyes blinking open for a moment, but exhaustion seemed to weigh it down. "I'll be back," he murmured, as if the bear could understand. Taking a deep breath, he jogged to the outcrop, phone in hand. At the top, breathless from the scramble, he finally managed to catch a weak bar of signal. He dialed the park's emergency number, something he'd memorized from the signage at the entrance. Several rings later, a ranger named Alice Dawson picked up. He explained the situation as calmly as he could. "I found a bear. It's injured, bleeding. I'm about an hour from the main road, near the old Pine Ridge campsite. I need assistance." Her voice carried professional composure but also concern. "Stay put. Don't attempt to move the bear. We'll dispatch a team. Keep your phone on if you can. Give us as much detail as possible about your location." He ended the call, relief flooding him. But that relief was short-lived, because heading back to the wounded animal, he realized that waiting passively for the rangers might mean the bear could succumb to blood loss or infection. Time stretched, and minutes felt like hours. He tried his best to keep the injured leg wrapped, offering sips of water by cupping a small tin mug he had in his pack and tipping it carefully near the bear's muzzle. Initially, the bear wanted nothing. Eventually, it lapped a bit, stirring faintly. Each small sign of life reinvigorated Nathan's determination. During that silent vigil, memories churned through his mind, his father teaching him about respecting nature, his mother pointing out that all living things, no matter how large or small, felt pain and deserved compassion. The thrill he'd felt as a boy upon seeing a bear from a distance, heart pounding, not with fear, but with fascination. He realized how disconnected he'd become from what once brought him so much joy. Nearly 2 hours passed before he heard voices in the distance. Alice Dawson and 2 other rangers, Tom and Javier, emerged from the trees, each bearing medical supplies and carrying a small tranquilizer kit. They were focused, all business. Alice took charge, kneeling next to the bear with practiced expertise. She administered a mild sedative, allowing them to examine the injuries without risking the bear panicking. "Bullet wound," Tom said grimly, after parting the fur and inspecting the laceration. "Definitely looks like a small caliber bullet. Could be a poacher." Javier nodded, gathering more gauze to clean the wound. We'll need the mobile wildlife rescue team to transport it for surgery. But we can stabilize it here. Nathan's stomach twisted at the thought that someone had shot this bear. His protective instincts flared. "You can save him, right?" he asked, voice raw with urgency. Alice offered a tight smile. "We'll do our best. Right now, you've already done a lot by keeping the bleeding under control. We'll get him to a proper facility." The next hour was a whirl of bandages, antiseptics, and logistical chatter. A specialized cart was brought in designed to safely move an injured animal along with a heavier tranquilizer to keep the bear calm during transit. The rangers worked with professional efficiency, but also with compassion. They let Nathan help, handing them supplies and steadying the cart's wheels over uneven ground. At last, they began the slow trek back. Nathan followed, his heart thudding every time the bear moaned or shifted. By the time they made it to a gravel access road, a wildlife rescue truck was waiting. It was from a facility called Montana Wild Animal Rehabilitation Center, a real and well-respected non-profit that worked closely with the National Park Service. Nathan had heard of it before, but never imagined he'd be in the thick of a rescue operation. The rangers carefully transferred the bear into the crate on the truck, hooking up on the fourth and securing the bear's leg. Alice turned to Nathan, wiping sweat from her brow. "Thank you," she said. "You might have saved this animal's life. If you hadn't come along when you did, there's no telling what would have happened." As the truck revved to head toward the center, Nathan felt a tug in his chest. "Do you mind if I come?" he asked, surprising even himself with the question. Alice eyed him curiously. "We can't allow non-staff in the back with the bear, but if you want to drive your own vehicle to the center, you're welcome. It's about an hour north, just past Billings." Nathan nodded resolutely. Despite having come for a relaxing weekend, he felt compelled to see this through. In the swirl of concern for the bear, he'd nearly forgotten his campsite, his gear, or even the sunrise he'd so eagerly set out to capture. Without hesitation, he jogged back to pack up his tent, tossed everything into his car, and sped off to follow the rescue truck. The Montana Wild Animal Rehabilitation Center was a sprawling facility with barns, paddocks, and specialized enclosures to house injured wildlife. When Nathan arrived, he found the bear already inside a dedicated veterinary ward. He paced anxiously in the waiting area, feeling a strange kinship with the creature he'd known for only a matter of hours. Finally, Alice stepped out, peeling off surgical gloves. "It's a male yearling," she said quietly. "We're calling him Rusty for now, because of that reddish tint in his coat. The bullets lodged pretty deeply in his leg, but our veterinarian is hopeful they can remove it and repair the damage. They're prepping him for surgery as we speak." Nathan exhaled, shoulders sagging with relief. "That's good news. Can I see him when he's stable?" Alice nodded. "Yes. Once he's past surgery and out of sedation, we can allow limited visits. But we typically keep wild animals as separate from humans as possible, so they don't grow dependent. Our goal is to rehabilitate him and eventually release him back into the wild." That process took weeks. Nathan returned to his job, but the experience haunted him. In stolen moments during coffee breaks, on weekend afternoons, he'd phone the rehab center to check on Rusty's condition. The update started as guarded. "He's recovering. The wound is healing," but eventually turned positive. "He's standing now, putting weight on the leg. No sign of infection." Every call filled Nathan with hope, but also a longing for something he couldn't quite name. He began volunteering on weekends, drawn by an urge that surpassed mere curiosity. He ended up helping clean enclosures, feed orphaned fawns, and perform light maintenance. Though the staff rarely allowed him to interact directly with Rusty, fearing the bear's bond with humans could disrupt a successful release just being near that cage. Hearing the low rumble of the young bear, was enough. Each visit anchored him to a sense of responsibility and, strangely, gratitude. In the months that followed, Nathan's own life began shifting in subtle ways. At first, it was just his outlook. He found himself less impatient with co-workers, more forgiving of strangers on the street. His once incessant desire to climb the corporate ladder receded. Instead, he discovered a yearning for something more meaningful. Even his father noticed during a phone call, "You sound different, son, calmer, happier. Everything okay?" "Better than okay, Dad," Nathan replied, a small smile on his face. "I feel like I'm waking up, remembering how I used to feel about nature, about life." By early winter, Rusty's improvement was remarkable. The bullet had been removed. Physical therapy, carefully orchestrated by the center's veterinary team, helped him regain strength. He learned to climb logs in a controlled enclosure, and his appetite soared. Plans were formed for a spring release into a protected area near Yellowstone, pending final clearances. Nathan took time off in March to be present for the big day. It was still cold, snow dusting the pines and covering the roads. The staff from Montana Wild Animal Rehabilitation Center loaded Rusty, now a robust, lively bear, into a transport crate. He'd grown bigger in the months of care, sporting a healthier coat, his black fur glinting with those telltale reddish highlights. Though the staff minimized human contact to keep him wild, Nathan couldn't help stepping forward, heart-pounding, to wish the bear well before the crate was closed. "Thanks for everything you taught me," he murmured, just loud enough for the bear to hear. Rusty's dark eyes flicked in Nathan's direction, and there was a fleeting moment of recognition, at least. That was how it felt to Nathan. The convoy of rangers, volunteers, and a veterinarian made their way through winding roads, back into the forest. This time, they chose a release site far from major trails, ensuring Rusty would have the best shot at reintegrating into the wild. When they finally arrived, hush fell over the group. Trees soared overhead, branches draped with a delicate lace of snow. A small clearing opened between the pines, with a stream meandering by. It was the perfect place for a second chance. They positioned Rusty's crate on the ground. Two staff members unlatched the door and retreated. The tension was palpable as everyone watched the opening. At first, nothing happened. Then, a snout emerged, sniffing cautiously. Slowly, Rusty edged out. He paused, scanning the horizon as if reacquainting himself with a world he'd nearly lost. With surprising grace for such a large creature, he loped forward, eventually disappearing among the trees. The only evidence of his presence was the rhythmic crunch of branches under his paws. Nathan felt tears well in his eyes, a mix of joy and sorrow. Joy for Rusty's new beginnings, sorrow because he might never see the bear again. But that was how it was supposed to be. Rusty was a wild being, meant to roam free. In that moment, Nathan realized just how profoundly this experience had changed him. It was more than saving a bear's life. It was about rediscovering his own humanity, forging a bond with nature, and recognizing a deeper calling within himself. That night, by the campfire at a nearby ranger station, he spoke quietly with Alice Dawson. "I want to do this," he said, voice trembling slightly in the crisp air. She lifted an eyebrow. "Do what?" "Work with wildlife, conserve, educate people on how to protect these animals. This entire experience, it's opened my eyes. I didn't realize how numb I'd become until I found that wounded bear in the woods." It was like a wake-up call. Alice offered a thoughtful nod. "It's a tough field, physically and emotionally. Funding isn't always stable, and the job demands are huge, but it can be one of the most rewarding careers. Are you sure you're up for that?" Nathan gazed at the starlit sky, inhaling the cold, clear air. "I am. I've never been more sure of anything." When he returned to his city job, everything felt different. The fluorescent lit office walls seemed confining. the endless spreadsheets meaningless in comparison to the raw authenticity of the wild. For a couple of months, he balanced both worlds working weekdays, volunteering at the rehab center on weekends. He gleaned all the knowledge he could from the staff, reading up on wildlife biology, conservation, and best practices for rescue and rehabilitation. His parents, initially skeptical, "You're going to abandon a stable job," came around when they saw the passion lighting up his eyes, the renewed energy in his voice. One day in late May, the center's manager approached Nathan with an offer. "We have a permanent position open, wildlife education specialist. You'd be working with us to teach the public about local fauna, how to coexist responsibly, and you'd assist in some rescue efforts. It won't pay as much as your city job, but I think your heart's in it." Nathan agreed without hesitation. He handed in his resignation at the office, packed up his apartment, and moved closer to the center. The change was drastic, but it filled him with a sense of purpose he'd never felt. Each morning, he'd rise with the sun, greet the animals, monitor the center's calls. He specialized in guiding tour groups, particularly children, around the facility, explaining how to respect wildlife and what to do if they ever encountered an injured or orphaned animal. His personal story about finding Rusty in Yellowstone never failed to captivate them and highlight the importance of immediate, compassionate action. Yet, he also learned that not every rescue ended happily. Some animals arrived too late, injuries were too severe, or disease had already taken hold. Nathan had to wrestle with heartbreak and frustration, but those experiences only deepened his resolve to keep pushing for better awareness and stronger protections for wildlife habitats. As the months turned into a year, he often thought of Rusty. He wondered how the young bear was faring in the vast wilderness. Park rangers sometimes reported sightings of a healthy black bear with a faint reddish tinge, but they couldn't confirm it was Rusty. The idea that the bear was out there, living as nature intended, gave Nathan solace. One early autumn evening, after a long day of leading an educational workshop, Nathan decided to take a hike in the forest bordering the rehab center. The leaves were turning gold, and the air carried that unmistakable crispness. Without a specific destination in mind, he wandered, letting the hush of the woods guide him. Eventually he reached a secluded stream that meandered beneath a thick canopy of pines. It reminded him of the clearing where Rusty had been released. He sat by the bank, listening to the gentle gurgle of water, the occasional rustle of squirrels. A subtle shift of movement caught his attention. Across the stream, emerging from the thicket, was a bear. Nathan's pulse quickened. Slowly, gently, he raised his head. The bear was large, perhaps fully matured since the time of the rescue. Its coat was dark, with hints of rust around the shoulders and down the sides. The bear turned its head, eyes locking onto Nathan. For a breathless moment, man and bear regarded one another. Nathan's heart soared. He suspected it had to be Rusty, though he could never be absolutely certain. They were mere yards apart, separated by the narrow waterway. The bear raised its muzzle, catching the wind, analyzing the scent. Nathan remained still, aware that any sudden movement might frighten or provoke the animal. He felt no fear, only a profound sense of connection, reminiscent of that first day in the forest. Perhaps 10 seconds passed, though it felt like an eternity. The bear gave a quiet chuff, then lumbered away, disappearing back into the trees. Nathan let out a trembling breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. A warmth spread in his chest, tears pricking his eyes. Rusty, or the bear he believed to be Rusty, was alive, strong, free. That fleeting encounter was a gift, an affirmation that he'd chosen the right path. The wounded bear he'd once found had, in turn, saved Nathan from his own wounded spirit. He lingered by the stream, replaying the moment in his head. He felt, for perhaps the first time in his adult life, utterly at peace. No corporate deadlines, no empty ambitions, no stifled dreams. Just the quiet hymn of nature, the serenity of the woods, and the knowledge that he had a place in this world as a protector and advocate for creatures that couldn't speak for themselves. In the coming years, Nathan would share that story often, not to boast, but to remind people of the power of compassion and the interconnectedness of all living things. Students at the rehab center would crowd around, eyes wide as he recounted how he discovered Rusty bleeding among the ferns, how he made that frantic call for help, and how that single act sparked a lifelong journey of conservation work. When visitors asked if he ever missed his old life or the larger paycheck, he'd laugh softly. "No," he'd say, "I found my true calling in the forest that day." Sometimes a single choice, like saving a wounded bear, can save you right back. Outside the center, local headlines occasionally highlighted his work. Former office worker devotes life to wildlife rescue, or community bands together to support rehabilitation efforts. Yet Nathan never sought the spotlight. His reward came from each successful release, from seeing fox cubs scampering back into the wild, hawks taking flight after mended wings, and, of course, the memory of Rusty's final glance in that clearing. And so it was that one autumn day in Yellowstone changed everything. A chance encounter with a wounded bear led Nathan Bennett down a path he never imagined. He faced doubt, heartbreak, and the grind of learning a new field, but through it all, he carried the memory of Rusty's resilience and his own transformation. The forest, once just a childhood playground, became his life's mission. Each time he trekked into the woods, senses sharpened, heart open, he felt the reverberations of that fateful day. He was no longer just an onlooker in nature's grand tapestry. He was a thread woven in its vibrant design. Though the exact spot in Yellowstone where it all began might fade in detail with time, the profound lesson never would. Compassion for another being, no matter how wild or fearsome, can reverberate far beyond a single moment. It can heal, unite, and guide us to become better versions of ourselves. Over the years, as Nathan taught new volunteers how to handle frightened fawns or orphaned raccoons, he'd always remind them, never underestimate the power of a simple act of kindness out there. You might think you're saving them, but they might end up saving you too. Thank you for joining me on this deeply personal journey, where a wounded bear in the woods of Yellowstone sparked a chain of events that transformed one man's entire outlook on life. If this story of resilience, compassion, and unexpected connections resonated with you, I encourage you to show your support. Every like, share, and subscription helps us spread the message that even the smallest act of kindness can reverberate in unimaginable ways. It's a reminder that we're all part of nature's grand tapestry, and taking care of one another, humans and animals alike, brings us closer to a world filled with hope and understanding. If you found inspiration here, please tap that like button, share this story with someone who could use a spark of hope, and subscribe to this channel for more tales celebrating the power of empathy, courage, and personal growth. Thank you for watching, and keep the wild in your heart.